The Prime Minister has called for calm as debate rages about the link between the climate change issue and bushfires at the moment. Let's cross live to political reporter TRUDY McIntosh. TRUDY, Scott Morrison is defending Australia's actions to lower emissions. He gave a press conference, quite a long press conference in Melbourne.
Yeah, it certainly was, Chris. It was a very wide-ranging press conference. He was there announcing $11 million for additional aerial support for firefighters, given this bushfire crisis that we see continuing to ravage the East Coast. But he was also peppered with questions about if the government is doing enough to address climate change. He slammed that report you talked about in your editorial about the Climate Performance Index, saying that he doesn't believe it's got any credibility as it put Australia on the bottom of the leaderboard when it comes to climate policy. The Prime Minister also, though, downplaying divisions within the Liberal Party about whether there is enough being done. We saw yesterday the New South Wales Liberal Environment Minister, the State Minister, saying that there needs to be more ambitious action, and that's been backed in by the federal Liberal MP Jason Falinski today, who says there needs to be more ambitious action on the global stage when it comes to Australia's emissions targets and things like that. But the Prime Minister was also trying to calm concerns and really, interestingly, address the anxiety that we have seen in places like Sydney, given that smoke haze that continues to linger.
We will continue to work to reduce our emissions, as we should. But what we cannot say, what no one can say, is those programs of themselves are in any way directly linked to any fire event. I know, because I'm a Sydney-sider, and I know how unusual it is to see that haze across my city. And I know how distressing that has been, particularly for young people who wouldn't have seen that before. And so that is why I think it is important to have a sense of calm about these matters.
Yeah, a bit of perspective, as we've shown people smoke hazes in reports of them in days gone by. TRUDY, the Prime Minister and his Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, also talked about this complicated, difficult but very important area of digital platforms review, and he's put the big tech giants on notice.
He certainly has, Chris. The Prime Minister today talking tough when it comes to these big tech giants, things like Facebook and Google, as the government finally, after 6 months, provides its response to this digital platforms inquiry. I'll take you through some of the recommendations that the government is now proceeding with. The first of this being a new monitoring unit for the ACCC, nearly $30 million going for them to look into the tech companies' advertising algorithms. The second being leavening the bargaining power between these tech giants and the news companies, tasking the ACCC to look at a voluntary code of conduct to look at the industry, but they're really saying if they don't get that voluntary code of conduct, they will make a mandatory code. And thirdly, reforms to the media regulations, and then finally changes to the Privacy Act. Here was how the Prime Minister phrased it.
We have regulation and systems that were written for an analogue economy, and I want Australia to be one of the most, if not the most successful digital economy in the world. And so our response is all about that. That means jobs, that means incomes, that means an income for Australia which supports the essential services Australians rely on. We must be successful in this digital world. We can't be afraid of it. We can't pull the doona over our head and pretend it's not there.
So the Prime Minister pretty clear there that these big tech giants are now on notice. The Prime Minister wants Australia to be a model nation around the world in developing these sort of landmark reforms.